accounts, he was very impressive with a handpiece in his hand at the Southern Field Days, or perhaps otherwise, according to Sarah Perrin, but we will talk about that later in the interview. Agricultural Minister Damien O'Connor has recently returned from a fact-finding trip to Europe, in between times, of course, dealing with many issues, including the drought declarations and the big one, I guess, which I think from what I can gather from the market research that Loie and Sarah conducted down there at Southern is M Bovis. Huge talking point. Minister Damien joins us now. Good morning, Damien.
Good morning. How are you going?
Yeah, good to have you on the show, Damien. Where are we at with M Bovis? I mean, what promises can we make to farmers affected by this and the bigger picture overall?
Well, the only promise I make is that we've got a dilemma in front of us, and we're at this stage trying to track every single possible infection in every animal. We need to do that so that we can round them up and then hopefully eradicate them. Those decisions will be made after we get the bulk milk testing is done. We get some discard samples from dairy farmers, and we've tracked through NATE and through discussions with farmers, every possible calf might have gone.
Damien, are we in a case of maybe the farmer has been his worst enemy, with NATE I'm meaning, that MPI is finding it very, very difficult to trace some of these animals and milk, aren't they?
Look, I think it's a wake-up call for us all, and NATE was brought in a bit reluctantly. Feed farmers campaigned against it for a while. There were some technical issues. People kind of couldn't see the value at the time, but actually other countries around the world have had full traceability systems for a long time. So anyway, we've got it now it's just cost for a cattle. We don't have it for sheep. And so, it's not been perfect, but there hasn't been a level of compliance, shifting animals farm to farm, just around the place. If they go to the works, they have to comply. Sale yards have been okay, but look, it's a wake-up call. We have to have a system like this that works properly. We know where animals are. It's what our customers want, and it's what we need.
Damien, of course, looking forward to the future, dealing with what's in front of us now rather than behind. Is our she'll be right attitude sort of where we've got to, that we've sort of now just say, oh, well, this is where we have to live with it? These calves born in 2016-17 from these Stratton farms, we're talking quite a large catchment to try and trace now.
We are, and MPI has been focused on everything in 17. Mark Bryant and the vets that maybe we have to go back to 16. I think that we can do some trial of that 16 testing. We are ramping up the number of people on the ground, the questions we're asking, the people we're contacting, because we know come Gypsy Day, it's going to be a whole new ball game. So we're very aware of the challenge ahead of us. Dairy NZ have stepped up with some people. So we're trying to coordinate, the best and biggest effort we can in the next 2 months.
Damien, with this incursion, and in the past we've had others like Varroa, PSA, Myrtle Rust, Pea Weevil, Velvet Leaf, it goes on and on and on. This is really bad. If you find, and the first thing is to stamp it out and then get rid of it, but if you find that it was illegally brought into the country, can you promise that the hammer will come down on the individuals severely?
I'm no lawyer, but I can promise you that we'll pursue every legal avenue we can. What we're also going to do is going to go through and review the Biosecurity Act. In my view, and officials agree, it's not working ideally. I've talked about things like Privacy Act, about obligation to compensate when sometimes the person might have created the problem. There are a number of issues there through the Biosecurity Act we need to change, so that we do, let people know if you're going to cut a corner or be responsible, then you're going to pay the price.
Is it time to not shut the borders, tighten it? Because as I spoke to you yesterday, there's a ticking time bomb, and everyone has said it for many, many years, palm kernel.
Oh, yeah, everyone's should be cutting back, actually. It's not. It's ramped up. There's about 2 million tonnes coming in now. Look, that's only one pathway. Look, we turned around 3 boats that were bringing cars into New Zealand. They wouldn't all be second-hand, there'd be some of them new. we've turned them around and sent them away back to sea last week because they had brown marmorated stink bug all through them. And so we're going to be really blunt. The message will go out from that action that New Zealand's not going to tolerate, a second-rate biosecurity system and process. So every one of us, though, has to be conscious. If we're buying something, we make sure it's from a reputable source, that we don't just take these things for granted because they cost us hundreds of millions of dollars.
Damien, how much money is the Labour government, or the current government, prepared to throw at trying to eradicate M Bovis and the farmers that, don't quite meet when the door gets shut, when they find out that they've got it?
We haven't put a figure on that. We've got money for all the operational needs to date, and we know that there'll be a big lump sum needed once we embark upon an eradication program. But industry's going to have to stump up as well. It's going to be a combined effort here, and we haven't put a figure because we don't know the extent of the program. We still hope from the two sources of infection that we can go out, trace every possible animal, and then wind it back, test them, see whether they're infected, wind it back, and then, of course, effectively get rid of the ones that are infected.
Damien, rough figures, and this is only RLO's rough figures, if it becomes a situation with the dairy industry, farms close up, they graze their replacements on farm, they grow their own winter feed, cows or their animals do not leave the property, that could be up to a third of their milking herd taken out. That'll be a big knock for the industry, won't it?
Absolutely huge, and I think Ben Walling, poor guy who's got hit with his calves, he went on radio last week and I think did a really good job saying, look, you can't underestimate that how this is going to affect the way we farm, and I absolutely back that up. It will affect, we move our animals around, we, as I say, winter grazing, all of those things, that will have to be totally reviewed, and so fingers crossed, all hands to the pump, and any farmer who suspects that there might have been some connection, put your hand up and we'll come in and help you, and we can get on top of this.
No doubt about it. It is a massive game changer. We thank you for your time, Minister Damien O'Connor. Thank you for joining us. It's 6:29 here on Rural Exchange Radio Live. Rex, as we are affectionately known. Guys, happy with your responses from the Minister?
I think so. I think he's put, stern word, and by the sounds of it, and I think that he's committed to really making sure there's a focus for the government.
Yeah, so eradication.
The interesting thing there, when I put it to him about palm kernel and Fonterra and the big dairy companies, we're going to cut back. We're not going, and he said it's ramped up. I think, I import semen with my stud sheep, and the hurdles you have to jump and get everything, and it's bloody expensive to get it here. I think this bringing in palm kernel and stuff like that is not necessary. Sure, we might have to shrink our operations, but can we afford, like I said, varroamite was bought in through greed, PSA was greed, and, the pea weevil and velvet leaf, that shouldn't have got into this country.
No, not in 2017, 2018.
Very looking forward to
2014, 2012, whenever these things happen,
And this PKE, palm kernel coming in, tons and tons of it, is a ticking time bomb.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Specifically, now we'll concentrate in terms of a vet's perspective on the reaction to M Bovis. Is it going to become is it eradication? I think that's just the horse has bolted, hasn't it? It's a management issue now, controlling it. So next up on the show, talking to Mark Bryan from Vet South. Bang on 6:30 here on Rural Exchange.
Radio Live Rural Exchange.
6:34, 26 minutes away from 7. Rural Exchange Radio Live every Saturday and Sunday morning. Hamish Mackay, Sarah Perry and Richard Lowe. So we've heard from the Minister, Damien O'Connor, with, a reasonably broad brush approach to the very, very wide issue that is now M Bovis, and it's a story that's going to keep on giving, unfortunately. This week, now we're going to talk to Mark Bryan, who's a vet with Vet South, and this week Vet South are urging farmers whose stock or properties might have been linked to the infected Southland farms owned by, what is this? This is
Z-Stratons.
Z-Stratons, yeah, to come forward before it's too late. I tell you what, before it's too late is kind of a, yeah.
Well, it's interesting here. Of the 23 infected properties from 48 farms under restricted place notice, 1,500 properties they have to now trace animal movements.
Okay, so Mark Bryan from Vet South joins us. Great to have you on the show, Mark. Can you first up explain? Oh, we don't have Mark as yet. Okay, we're standing by. My apologies. Sorry, I thought we did have Mark there.
It'll be great to get information from Mark from behind the line, so to speak, because, we've heard the ministers talk. We've heard Hart's talk, where he's the operations manager, so to speak. And it's all been very prim and proper, but I'm looking forward to getting the guts of the story from behind the front line, so to speak.
So what are you guys hearing in terms of on the line, on the farm? I mean, how many guys how many farmers, looking at the actual nuts and bolts of this, are going to have to close the gate, walk because of this? Is it going to wipe farms out? Wipe out livelihoods?
It won't wipe farms out because they'll come back and commence farming. It might wipe individual businesses out that can't survive it, because of financial restraints, etc. Yes. But they'll carry, if it doesn't go away, it becomes a management problem. And a management problem like this costs money. So it will take the fat out of the system, and it will be much, much more difficult to farm. And it's just, it's awful.
Just more massive overheads and worry and time. It just makes it a far less attractive proposition.
You walked around, and if that was the subject, there were that many stories about people knew this and people knew that. Situations where calves and milk had been traded for, other services. So there was no traceability of that milk and those calves, where they'd gone, etc. And, that's... The farmer might think he's doing a good job, and hey, I don't care whether you're a tradesman or a person that lives in the city, you've all probably done a cashier at some stage.
Oh,
but
Lowie, careful, you'll be getting a call.
No, but when you do that, on a larger scale, I mean, not hundreds, 50s, hundreds of calves. And something like this, it comes around and bites you on the arse, and you have to be careful. It's your business.
Yeah. Yep. It is 6:37 here on Rex Rural Exchange. Standing by to talk to Mark Bryan there from Vet South. Okay, so just while we're dialing Mark up, very quickly, Lowie, is Nate, and I was having a great conversation with a couple of learned friends during the week about traceability of New Zealand export product, in the supermarket in the UK, Los Angeles, whatever, etc., and kind of they're a little laughable in terms of our record keeping at farm level. So how on earth can we possibly even think that we can start to have decent levels of traceability? I think at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit on the fence. I'm going to say there's a percentage doing this very well, and there's a percentage who are rubbish and ruining it for everybody else.
And we have to be careful about, it's a hard one, isn't it, Lowie? We're having the conversation at field days. Do we go hard on this and say this is an issue, or do we not? Because, media these days and our show is global in terms of its broadcast to then our international markets to get scared that we have an issue.
If you go back the other way, Sarah.
Oh, we can't hide stuff, though. We can't hide stuff. We have to be realistic.
Hey, if you go back the other way and listen to all our processes, whether dairy company, meat processors, etc., New Zealand Merino, etc., they tell a story and they want traceability so the purchaser of the end product can find out where it came from and its history. Well, as farmers, we want top dollar for our produce. Well, be a part of it and do the recording in the appropriate manner. Yep. And I think it's less just, and a lot of times, saying it's not user-friendly, or I have to write it down twice, etc. Yeah. Hey, sometimes you do, but if you want top dollar, you have to put the effort in.
Hey, Lowie, if you want to be a sub-4-minute miler, you have to do the training, don't you?
And can I suggest that people listening to our show that are having strong opinions, listening to what we're saying, or to the Minister and Mark, text us 3920. But also we do get some great emails throughout the week. So if you're a bit busy now, please just take the time to drop us rex at radiolive.co.nz and send us through your opinions and your thoughts. We want to hear from you. There's one dairy farmer that I spoke to. He said he simply just loves listening to our show to get more information about M Bovis, because he feels that these community meetings are simply MPI reading off their website. He just wants to know how do I suspect this? If I do, what do I do?
Yeah.
So I mean, that'd be great to put to Mark.
Quick question, very quick, before I talk to Mark. Sarah, what your take on mainstream? And when I say mainstream, I'm old school here. I'm sorry, but 6 o'clock news on both major channels. M Bovis, where is it lying? How often are we seeing it? How often has it been talked about? Does it feel like it's...
No, but we talk about Tony Street's new pregnancy, which I'm very happy for Tony Street. But that's a reflection of where things are at. Yeah. But we've got work to do here, and we're sitting right amongst MediaWorks and News Hub now, so let's make a difference. Yeah,
I agree. Okay, so we've heard from the Minister, Damien O'Connor. This week, Vet South have been urging farmers whose stock or properties might have been linked to the infected Southland-owned farms by Zestraton come forward before it's too late. Mark Bryan is a vet with Vet South and joins us now to look at this overall situation. But first of all, Mark, welcome to the show. Can you please tell us Vet South's involvement in working with MPI in response to M Bovis today? What's your guys' situation and part in this?
Morning, everybody. Well, I guess we've been watching from afar when it was up in Waimate, and we sent out a bunch of information to our farmers at a sort of weekly intervals, and everything had died down just before Christmas, start of December, and then all of a sudden they found this property in the middle of Southland. So then it was all hands to the pump, and just advising our farmers. So we've sort of felt as if we've been in the thick of it since December.
Tell us about your belief, how it's being handled by MPI, and are they doing enough?
Well, I guess they could always do more. I mean, that's always the perpetual challenge, isn't it, really? I think, to be fair, when it was in Waimate, I think they responded well. It was picked up very early by a vet up there, just in sort of a routine check, and very quickly she diagnosed it very quickly, considering it's a disease that we've never seen before, so that was remarkable. And they swung into action, and I think that went well. I was standing quite far away from it, obviously. I think when it came down to South, and especially with it being in that cluster of properties, it sort of took MPI a bit by surprise. So they've certainly been stretched by that second cluster, and that second cluster has led to a whole bunch of traces. And as you noted in your intro, we're trying our best to sort of help people get, come forward, because it's remarkable. People still, might have half a dozen calves, and they haven't sort of picked up on this M Bovis thing, and they sort of wander in and say, "What's this M Bovis?" So there's lots of areas that the information doesn't get to. Lots of people don't get the information. So it seems to be there's a lot of potential links, and it's very hard for MPI to follow them all up.
What's it like for farmers, and from an emotional perspective, coming forward and then being in the spotlight and it drastically affecting their business, as opposed to trying to deal with it behind closed doors?
Ooh, that's a good question, Sarah. I don't know. I mean, I think it's very hard for the likes of poor Alphonse. It must be very hard for him and his family, and I really feel for them and everybody else, of course, that are affected. It's challenging. I think it's the not knowing. MPI have got a process of testing and going through all that. So, of course, everyone's being tested. That's also a bit challenging. And then I think if you do get diagnosed, so if you become an IP and infected property, there's a process to go through. That's very frustrating for people. Sometimes animals may have to be culled or not, and that just seems to take time. And of course, it slows up and stops your whole farming operation. So, look, I just think it's awful for everybody involved. And the sooner we can get on top of this, whatever that looks like, it may be that getting on top of this looks like just control. and we just live with it. I'm hoping that if we get on top of this, it's eradication, but we just don't know.
You've been
Mark,
sorry.
getting around the field days, a lot of talk. Where did it come from? Why is it here? If people are getting very hot under the collar, so to speak, about this, any thoughts out there? Have you heard any? Can you let us know, let our listeners know what you believe? And because, we have to prevent these sort of incursions.
Yeah, my view is, it might sound a bit ridiculous, but it almost doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. It matters as you say, to prevent it again. So yes, we need to know where it's come from, but it hasn't come in 50 or 60 years, and for whatever reason it came in the past 2 or 3 years. So something's happened. But it doesn't matter. It's here now. I think we should have all of our resources just working out how we get on top of it. And whether it was a chance thing or something's changed in systems, I don't know. But my understanding is about 6 or 7 potential pathways of the way it could have come in, and each of those 6 or 7 are highly unlikely. But the point is, it's here, so one of those worked. But it may, in 60 or 70 years, it's never been here, so it may never happen again. That's not to say we can just ignore that risk, but the most important thing at the moment is to get on top of the disease, I think.
Mark, as a vet, what is your top tips for dairy farmers and sheep and beef farmers on how to identify signs of the disease, and what do you advise for them to do?
Well, the most common thing in cattle is lameness, mastitis. We have seen abortion and pneumonia. In calves, it seems to be pneumonia. So speaking to the vets in Waimate, it seems to be a wee bit different. They saw disease in cattle from memory, just coming up to calving, and they were quite sick, and they had a lot of mastitis in 3 or 4 quarters, a lot of animals affected. Of course, we haven't seen that down here. Different time of the year for us. We've seen a lot of disease in calves, and the calf disease has been pretty horrific. 25% mortality. Seems to be quite infectious. Lots of pneumonia. Calves just fading away, coughing and dying. So it's going to be different in different stock, but certainly calves that are looking sick, coughing, just not doing very well, particularly if they've got a history of being linked to any of these infected properties. That's what we're sort of looking for mostly. In cattle, in milking cattle, you'd be looking for mastitis, particularly in more than 1 or 2 quarters, that is difficult to treat. But I think let's be quite clear on this. The disease in milking cattle, we had the initial stuff in Van Loons, which was diagnosed, and then there's been the cluster down here in Z Stratton. And apart from that, we haven't had any milking cattle infected. So they're doing the bulk milk survey at the moment. My understanding is that most of those are coming back negative. So the biggest risk at the moment is calves, and that's where we're seeing most of the disease.
Do we know how all these farms, you talk about the Van Leeuwen, the Waimate situation, do we know how the cluster of farms you've got down there are linked? Is it through calves? Is it through milk? Is it through how it came in?
I think there is what they call a sort of a indirect linkage. So I don't think it's direct between these 2 clusters, but cattle move all over the shop, really, and there's certainly awful lot of cattle movements from certainly this local southern cluster. So it might be 1 or 2 steps indirectly. But I don't think we know. I certainly don't know.
Okay, Mark, thanks very much for your take and your your hands-on. You're right in the thick of it there. That is Mark Bryan from Vet South, Vet dealing with us on a daily basis, this M Bovis. I can promise you it is a topic that this show, we were all over the water last year around the time of the election. We'll be like a cold sore on a sunburnt fat lip on this one. We won't go away.